Chapter 2. What Legacy Shall Remain? The long night rolled over into an excruciating day that saw the king sat alone on his throne room for the first time since he and the bishop set to work. He melted into it, feeling jittery yet dizzy. The knots in the pit of his stomach twisted and churned, riling up nausea that had formed a lump in his throat that he couldn't swallow. He was in sad shape, not something he liked to show often, but before he could fully disguise it, he was joined by the others who shared in his misery. "Did you get any sleep, my love?" the Queen asked, as she took her place next to him. "There wasn't time, but it's finished," he replied with a wavering focus. "And you?" "I was just as lucky, I'm afraid," she smiled, squeezing his clammy hand in hers. "But I'm right here beside you." It took a single glance into his eyes to see everything he was holding back. She didn't press him to let it out, not there in public, but she knew. Instead, her attention shifted to the bishop, who was seated at a slight angle to his left. "And you, Bishop, how are you faring this morning?" "I'm a tired bag of bones, my lady. There's no denying that," he answered. "But service to the crown makes certain demands of us all." "It must have demanded you run circles around me last night, then," the king chuckled. "Thank you," he replied, accepting the joke as a compliment. "Oh, and I nearly forgot. I have the princesses practicing a lesson in the courtyard, as you requested, sire." "Good. Then everyone is in their place," the king responded blankly. "And just in time, too. I think our guests have arrived," the Queen added, in a mixture of false happiness and sarcasm, listening to the far-off droning of a baby's cries be carried ever closer. Hearing it, too, and knowing what it signified, he unenthusiastically rolled his eyes toward the white rabbit, who was in the slightly angled chair to the right of the Queen. "Rabbit, will you see them in?" "Absolutely, your Majesty, right away," he obliged, securing his watch into his pocket before hopping down. In the same instant he pulled the door open, he had to slide backward with it to avoid the stampede of the Bandersnatches bursting through, no doubt trying to escape the now blaring siren that was behind them. In an act of mercy, as they ran past the two still chained to the wall and out of the room, the Queen granted them freedom as well, releasing their leashes and letting them flee. That's when the Duchess appeared. The rabbit could only wish to be so lucky, having the duty of announcing her title as he pulled out her chair for her. He had to holler to hear himself over the shrill shrieks the baby made, wincing in pain as they assaulted his eardrums. "May I present the Duchess and the infant Duke of Wonderland?" From there, he scurried over to the Black Royalty to aid them with their chairs, but was shooed away by the Queen, who seated herself independently, presenting the King of Clubs and Queen of Spades, Lord and Lady of Blacksuit. He continued, retreating to his place with his paws over his ears. "Will you please quiet that thing, Duchess?" the King of Clubs snapped, obviously displeased with not being able to hear his own introduction. "I'm sorry, Your Blackness, I'm trying," she apologized in her angelic tone. "He's always a bear to deal with when he's woken before he's ready, especially with those ghastly Bandersnatches giving us the fright they did, prowling about and such." "Yes, well, it would seem that has inconvenienced us all now," he sneered. "I can have one of I can have a handmaiden rock him back to sleep while we discourse, if you'd like, said the Queen, offering assistance. That's very kind of you, your Highness, but I'd like him to be a part of this, she refused politely, as the baby squirmed in her arms. He shouldn't be a nuisance much longer. As you wish, the king acknowledged. He then moved on to speaking to the group, to the sound of fussy but de-escalating grunts and coos. I want to begin by thanking you for coming on such short notice. I regret taking you away from your duties, but I assure you, the matter at hand requires it. I've assembled the council because the bishop has received a visit from the messenger late in the night, and the prophecy it left behind is grim, to say the least. To state it plainly, the Jabberwock king undoubtedly intends on war. It's also written that if we take up swords to challenge him, we won't win, the White Rabbit finished meekly. Can't win, Rabbit. I believe the phrase is, we can't win, the Black King corrected. Which is why we should have killed him when there was still the chance. I couldn't do that, and you know it, brother, the king scolded. Couldn't or wouldn't, the King of Clubs challenged. No one knows those cliffs better than he fired back. Any scouting or raiding party I sent would have likely been massacred before they even caught a glimpse of him, a pointless sacrifice. Oh, and what exactly have we gained from those you've seen value in? His sibling pressed further. Each time one of his beasts flies down to face you on your grounds, they seem to multiply in strength and bloodthirst while our numbers only deplete. Everything has been a test, every man-to-monster encounter, every torched village. He's been looking for weaknesses. That's why he's chosen to attack now, because he's found one. So head-to-head conflict isn't how we handle this, the Duchess reasoned. But what if we apply a different strategy? He has been hunted since the death of your father, but perhaps if we extend an olive branch and listen to his demands, we can reach an agreement to keep the peace and not resort to such barbarianism. I second that, the rabbit spoke up. If we can't enforce peace, we must be able to influence it. But the nobility could be easily spotted from his many vantage points, and his lack of trust in them could cause him to feel threatened or provoked. They need a neutral representative that can sneak up there without suspicion and meet him in good faith. I'll go. A noble nomination, Rabbit, but unfortunately not one I can allow, the Queen replied. The prophecy gives no mention of other options. Besides, if a creature as vile as the Jabberwock King has his mind set on destruction, he's moved well beyond any hope of negotiating, the Lord of Black Suit butted in. You're both right, the king intercepted. But where we're unable to prevent the future that's been laid out for us, perhaps we can alter it. Is that a plan I'm sensing, Your Eminence? Asked the rabbit, adjusting his monocle. Yes, though it won't be a popular one, he answered hesitantly. As my brother has so graciously reminded us, our body count has risen, but those deaths have not been in vain. Just as our enemy has been studying us, we likewise have studied them, and learned that while they can be slain by conventional weapons, they've proven not to be the most efficient means with which to do so. That leaves us with magic. I've created a new weapon, a rose of pure light that will pursue and eradicate the shadows that the Jabberwock King gathers in. And how does it work? The rabbit inquired again, sitting forward intently. Once the nectar of the rose is consumed, it amplifies the magical essence of one's soul, feeding on it until it dries up, he went on to say. Meaning, interrogated the rabbit a third time. Meaning it kills the user, the King of Clubs chimed in, wearing a grin of realization. If he drinks from this rose of his, he and everything around him will die in a splendiferous fashion. I do believe our king wants to make a martyr of himself, a stark contrast from the legacy of our father. How dare you accuse the king of such vanity? The queen exclaimed, nearly jumping from her seat. Grabbing her arm to hold her back, the king aggressively countered. Do not insult me, brother. My legacy will not be compared to that of some mad tyrant. It is in the daughters that will reign long after we are gone, and in the people that will look to them to make the difficult decisions for the well-being of their home. I will do whatever it takes to preserve that. But is it true? The Duchess asked, impatiently, returning to the original topic of conversation. It is. When the essence is completely drained, it triggers a violent explosion of force, annihilating everything caught in its radius and erasing it from existence. It will be as though we, the enemy, and this castle were never there. He responded in an ashamed tone. A sudden hush overtook the room as the council weighed the consequence of these words. But the Duchess was the first to speak. Suppose you do this, is red, and white for that matter, ready for the responsibility that comes with taking your place. I'd like to answer that if I may, my lord, the bishop fielded. As they've grown, I've done my best to prepare the princesses to succeed their parents, whether it be naturally or through an arisen need. And what if your best isn't good enough? The Black King pressured. I won't lie, your grace. I've never felt it my place to make guarantees, he defended. And with the utter preposterousness of our debate over the last several minutes, what could I safely? Now, they are young, yes, but they are wise beyond their years. Enough so that they comprehend that they owe it to their lineage, their kingdom, and themselves to uphold what the crown symbolizes. I implore you to take the word of an old man, whatever it's worth to you. They're ready. I'll ensure this myself, the king volunteered. It will take a day or two to muster the manpower and supplies for the coming battle. I'll use what time I have left to test them. When I am satisfied, we can move forward with Red's coronation. So be it, his brother huffed. But answer me this. Have you told them what the Jabberwock King really is? Who he really is? And I don't mean the lies you've conjured to protect them. I've conjured nothing, the king tried explaining. I mean the truth, the other king cornered. No, I haven't, he submitted. Don't you think it'd be wise, the Duchess asked sympathetically, attempting to soothe the berating. If it's not too bold to say, your highness, it's remaining in the darkness, blinding ourselves to the situation that has doomed us, the rabbit contributed cautiously. Yes, he agreed with both, gulping restlessly. I'll do it. Chapter 3. Sleight of Hand. Sometime later, the council adjourned, parting somewhat somberly, knowing they wouldn't convene again. It took the guests of the castle the rest of the day to travel, with the black royalty returning to their territory just as night fell. But this is not where they stopped. Their agenda looked to Blacksuit's horizon, to the jagged cliffs that bordered them in, where evil was said to reside. The two figures hooded their identities and started up the path, having done it many times but feeling no more familiar or secure than the first. The way was treacherous, meaning progress involved forbearance if they were to survive the unpredictable shale rock that was paired with pike rock that could maim as easily as it could impale. Chills ran down the spine as the breezes of the numerous and imposing company were felt as they dashed by unseen, coming closer with each pass. The roars were startling. The way they reverberated off the natural structure made it difficult to gauge distance. The king and queen could do little more than pray that the owners of these calls were far away and not stalking them. Air was thinner at their destination, a large stone plateau with a shelter-like formation on the far end that reflected most of the moonlight from beside it. It was impossible to see the presence that held dominion here, or tell if there was one there at all, but the king announced himself regardless, seeking some form of permission. "We have returned, master." The voice that slithered out to seize his statement can only be described as the mournful lamentations of a dozen tortured spirits unable to find the release of death. Weak and labored, it haunted the air briefly before being wheezed away, as it was seldom louder than a whisper. "Approach," it granted, staring out of the darkness with two newly visible blood-red celarias and eclipsed irises. The black royalty obeyed and knelt in a bow, where it added, "What have you learned?" "He knows of your stirrings, that you'll soon be on the warpath," the king replied, rising to his feet. "The book of prophecies has shown him everything." "Not everything," it rectified. "The book has shown him what I intend to do, but not the why." "That's not all, my lord," he continued. "He's devised a powerful weapon. The crystal rose," it simplified. "You know of it?" he noted with surprise. "Yes," it hissed. "Then you must be reconsidering your move," he said with a trace of hope. "I am not," it discouraged. "But my lord, if he uses this weapon," he began to plead, "it will kill me," it said bluntly, snickering while relieving any doubt. "Does this not concern you?" the Black King questioned, off-put by his master's amusement. "No, for I am death, and everything it brings," the voice growled, unmoved. "Yes, your unholiness, of course, but perhaps you misunderstand me," he cowered, retracting his argument and exchanging it for a different tack. This goal has appeared to have pushed my brother to the brink. He is willing to forfeit his life and countless others to accomplish it. I just... "Speak your mind," the eyes urged, inviting the king to continue. "How can he so readily do something so reckless? How can the council support it?" he blurted. "The king of Wonderland and his followers are fearful and desperate," the voice informed. "They wrongfully assume I am coming to enact my revenge for the sins of your father. Instead, you've chosen to indulge his foolishness," he implied, speaking out of turn. "They and you alike are too naive to see that this is not to be a war of winners and losers, but rather to serve as a catalyst for a much grander happening," it snapped. "What I see is that our years of careful planning will be wasted, that everything that belongs to me Everything you promised will be reduced to rubble within the hands of children, the king rebounded. Do not let greed cloud your judgment, my apprentice, it scolded. I have not forsaken you, nor have I promised anything to you. I've merely provided you with the tools to capture your desires at your own discretion. But you must have patience. You're right, master. Forgive my outburst, he calmed. What do you ask of us next? The burden of war rests on my shoulders and mine alone. You will survive by abandoning your brother. Do not answer his call to arms. Do not aid him. Endure on your throne whilst the pieces fit into place, it directed. During which your nieces will be cast into the roles they'll play, and new prophecies will be written. But eventually, an occurrence will transpire close to you, rousing you from dormancy to react. Involvement may unearth an opportunity to take what you claim I owe. Now leave me. Very good, master. Thank you, the king minded, vacating the sight of the eyes and motioning for the queen to lead the expedition descending the cliffs. Oh, and one more thing. We won't converse again, so I hereby release you with a reward for your loyalty. It beckoned them with 5 palely glinting claws. That's going to wrap this episode up for us, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.